Hey there, everyone. Great to be here with you. You might notice my voice is not Alicia's voice. I've taken over the podcast today. It's James here. I actually did run this podcast for a good, 50, 60 episodes or something before Alicia took it over anyway. So hopefully I'll come across quite comfortable on this side of the microphone and we'll see how we go. I have an absolutely amazing guest to speak with today who's going to share one of her best business stories. It is one that happened a little while ago, but it was probably the most difficult thing in business that we've ever been through. Oh, I said we. That gives it away a little bit. But my guest today is Elicia. Elicia, welcome.
Thanks, James.
Fantastic to have you here. Elicia, this podcast really is about sharing those vulnerable moments, about going a little bit deeper, being open with how difficult business and life can sometimes be, for the purpose of then saying, sometimes those difficult times can unearth little gold nuggets. Not to say they're all fantastic, we really love it, but sometimes we can take little lessons out of it. So I guess as we were kind of talking about this, you've got so many good stories about that kind of stuff happening, right? And it sounds a bit of a weird thing to say for business coaches, but we and you did get into coaching because you made a lot of mistakes along the way. That's definitely one of the things that we often talk about, right?
Absolutely. That's certainly something that I'll often say quite openly. I'm not a coach because I did it right. I'm a coach because I made a lot of mistakes. I learned from them and eventually made it succeed.
Yeah,
but it wasn't particularly easy. And I think that it was the things that I learned along the journey that helps me have wisdom and insight into business, but also empathy and compassion on the tough days. And I think that for me, it's one of the reasons I got into coaching, because that's something that I did not know where to turn when I had really challenging times and days in the business. And there wasn't, it's like, where do you go when everything feels like it's going to the dogs?
Yeah. And it can be difficult if you're in more traditional business circles. People are a little bit cagey about sharing the challenges, right? It's like we're all happy to jump in and share wins, or lots of people are. Some people are even a bit cagey about that, to be honest. But when it comes to deep challenges that don't just challenge us financially in a complaining kind of way, but can actually challenge us personally, internally, there's not a lot of depth in lots of places anyway around business. I know some people are willing to go deeper. That's kind of what we're doing right here. So I guess what you kind of said to me was, let's flip the switch. You can interview me for a little bit. So I'm going to just ask you a couple of questions today and let you talk specifically about one major story that happened in the massage business that you were running at the time. So this was at a time where in your business, you had independent contractors, you had actual paper contracts written up with them that signed them and everything. And then we had to flip that over to employees using a legitimate government approved employment model. And there was a lot of challenges around that. Do you want to just share some of what that time was like? Maybe start with what actually happened, and then we can go a bit deeper from there.
Yeah. So when I first moved into one of the clinics that I had, within about 12 months, I was too busy and needed to hire. So I had no idea what I was doing. I think he might have had one regular client at the end of the first 12 months. And that was on me. Like, I had no idea as a boss, as a leader, as a mentor, no clue whatsoever what I was doing. And I didn't know how to support him in the best way possible. So he certainly wasn't set up for success. I decided that maybe it was because I had a guy. I don't know. So the next person I hired was a beautiful person who came out of, she just graduated from TAFE. And I also then had another friend of mine who was working with me as well. So there was just a couple of us. We're working out of one treatment room. And it was just that classic case of, I'm good at this, the hands-on skills. I've got too many clients, don't even really know why, but hey, my husband's a digital marketer. I guess that's got to be, I'm listening to what he says, so I guess that helps. And then we just sort of grew the team. Now, I had been a subcontractor. I had been employed at the day spas I worked at, but a subcontractor in other places. So I just went, I'll just have subcontractors because that's what I've experienced. So I just paid them a percentage per treatment that they did. And then we kind of went, look, I don't have to worry about super. That's too tricky. So I'll just pay you a bit more and then you guys pay your own super. And that was written into our contracts. I didn't have anyone make them up. I just kind of threw them together in a Word doc based on some stuff. It was sort of, I know saying that now out loud sounds like, what were you thinking?
I know if we had a client come to us with that
Exactly.
story, we'd be like, oh my goodness, red flags everywhere.
Okay, exactly. So, but you know what? Like I said, I'm not a coach because I got it right. I'm a coach because I made mistakes and then I've eventually got it right. So,
and it's not an uncommon story. That's the point. Lots of people are like, well, that's how I did it when I was first out of college. So I'll just do the same thing.
So, you know, what happened then over a period of probably about 4 or 5 years was that I started to hire more people. You know, the team grew. We moved across the road into a commercial space, and I just had all these subbies, all these subcontractors. They had their own ABN. We're really clear on what we did and didn't do. They actually, like, they came to me and said, "Can we please have a uniform?" I'm like, "Sure." It's not mandatory to wear it, but they all wanted to wear it because it was easier than having to choose their clothes every day. And we just it just sort of happened like that. Then at one point, I was talking to my accountant, and he had thought that they were really more like tenants rather than some independent contractors. And sort of as he sort of looked into, he had a look at the contracts that I had, and he's like, this says employment, subcontract, and tenant all through it. I'm dyslexic and I do creatively spell things, but I'm also likely to spell the same thing that means something else 5 different ways. So it was a leash put together thing. And he said to me, these are what would be called a sham contract. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, I am the most honest person. If I had the standard joke that I have is that if I fart and there's a smell and someone goes, who is that? I have to admit to it. Like, I can't lie. And my parents were in business, and my mum always said, if you're always honest in business, you can always lie straight in bed at night. So that's how I operated. Like, my intention was good. It was not my intention to have a sham contract. However, once my accountant looked into it, and we also discovered that the ATO rules had changed in 2010, which meant that the way that you could have independent contractors was quite different, meaning that if it looked like employment, sounded like employment, felt like employment, and essentially was employment, you had to have an employment contract. And if you were deemed to be, if you were found to be guilty of that, if Fair Work came in and had a look at your contracts and was fine you, we could be fined per contract per year from 2010. That freaked me out. Like, that was seriously so scary to discover that I had at that time 5 subcontractors who I was essentially sham contracting, had sham contracts in place, even though I paid them well above award wage. So I felt like I was being very generous and very fair. It just meant that I found myself in a really painful position, because it was either I continue doing something I know to be illegal, which is against my moral compass, or if I make these changes, I'm about to lower, because I would employ them, I'm about to lower what my staff are going to be paid. And nobody wants to go backwards in their pay rate. Like, that sucks. Because I was paying them per treatment and they were going to be paid per hour, which meant, yes, they would get paid for no-shows and breaks and things like that. But still, the rate of pay is ridiculously different. And I didn't consider doing casual employment. I only considered permanent part-time, because that's all what they would have been. And I was, just in black and white, I have to do this right kind of place. So they would have gone from, between $40 to $60 per treatment that I was paying them, down to about $23 an hour. And that is a sucky conversation to have. Now, some of these girls had just started with me, but some of the people I had with me, I had been to their engagement party. I'd been invited to their wedding. I got to hold their babies when they were first born and do some Bowen with them. Like, these were people that we had grown together. This was a really cohesive and tight-knit team. And to be able to have to then go to them, and like, I'm still proud of the way that I conducted myself through it. And that was the advice that I had from a mentor at the time, was whatever you do, act in a way so that in 5 and 10 and 15 years time, you can look back and go, that was tough, but I am proud of how I operated myself. And I would have to say that's true. I made a decision to move everyone to employment. So I had an individual conversation with each person, and I basically had a spreadsheet of, this is what you currently earn, this is what you stand to earn. Look, actually, in the way that it worked out, because they were getting paid super as well and getting paid for breaks and no-shows, it wasn't actually as vastly different as it sounded like on paper to go from $40 to $60 all the way down to 23. That sounds horrific, and it is. But by the time you factor in, there's a 75 minutes for actual treatment, like a treatment 60 minutes and a 15-minute gap and stuff
paid
like that.
Holidays.
And paid holidays and, sick pay and that kind of stuff. It wasn't as bad as it sounded. So I went in individually and spoke with each of them, and then I brought everyone together for a team meeting. The upshot of it was that 5 of them resigned in 3 weeks, which I mean, logically, I absolutely get. But I am also a really loyal person. And that was a really painful decision to have to make, that if I wanted to make my business legal and above board, I had to hurt the people that helped me make that business that way. Like that, it just sucked. It absolutely sucked. And there wasn't anybody that I could talk to that had been through a similar situation, either because they weren't prepared to talk about it, or they didn't know, because even now we have people that are doing really similar things. And it's been, I mean, this changed in Australia, this changed in 2010, and we're now in 2022. So this is still a long time ago, but there wasn't a lot of people that had experienced something like that. And the upshot of it was that I probably ended up with PTSD for quite some time. And it took me a long time to deal with that, because then with having 5 staff members leave, I still had to cover expenses. So I had a hostile team that were leaving. I had a bunch of clients who felt upset because their therapist was leaving. And I also had pain as a business owner because I was hemorrhaging money, not just losing it, but hemorrhaging it. At the same time, we'd already had a price rise within a month, and then we had to register for GST. So I had to add that on. So I had clients who were annoyed because we'd put our prices up by about $15. And they also couldn't see the staff member they wanted to see. I had a staff team that were leaving and upset and annoyed and thought that I was basically the meanest, most horrible person on earth. And all I wanted to do was make money and put money above them, as well as just the shame. I think honestly, really what it was the shame of making such a foolish decision, such a fool of myself, in that again, there was no one else that had ever paved the way for this. So there was just no one to talk to about it other than you, who was dealing with it at the same time. I think like there was just, that particular season is definitely one of the most toughest seasons that I think that I had to deal with.
Yeah, so I can hear also you did take some action through that. Obviously, you took action because legally you felt you had to, and there was maybe some things in there that might have made it go better. Who can tell as far as actions go? But also you're mentioning internally how you felt about that. What did you do, or did you do anything to actually look at your internal state and help yourself work through those difficult times?
Look, I think I was probably in survival mode, which was just really get up, work, because I was probably treating 30 to 35 clients a week. And we've spoken about this in other podcasts. I think what I did was get out my overfunctioning pants, and I just overfunctioned like a boss. Like I would do the work of 5 people, watch me. And so I would, I went from sort of seeing maybe 8 to 12 clients a week because I was, just working part-time because we had our daughter was in kinder, to then seeing sort of 30 to 35 clients a week. I'm like, I'll just do it all. And I think I did that quite well and successfully. And in some ways it's a gift, because if I went into underfunctioning, I probably would have lost the business, so overfunctioning was probably
the lesser of 2 evils. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, maybe that's the right way to put it. Yeah. But I think it was really tough to deal with that, because then I got a call from the ATO. And what had happened was, because I hadn't paid their superannuation, that was factored into their, their rate that they had per client.
So you had paid it to them. That was the agreement.
Yes.
But the government doesn't count that. You've got to pay it separately directly to a super account.
Yeah. And because I hadn't done that, one of the disgruntled employees or past team members, unfortunately triggered an audit, which meant that we were audited for superannuation guarantee that we had to pay, which we did. And again, like in the moment, it was literally a couple of weeks after all this stuff had happened. So it was like, everything's tough. I'm working my backside off. I'm overfunctioning like a crazy person. And now I get this letter, and it's from the ATO. And basically it says that I have not paid my superannuation guarantee, and that I need to call them. And I can still remember that moment of just going, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with any more stuff. This is more than I can deal with. And I felt like I was breaking, and I could, like, I know the human body. So I'm like, my adrenal glands I'm going to get, adrenal fatigue and all this stuff. It's like, just live in the moment and deal with it. What is literally in front of you right now, which is you need to call the ATO. I put in, basically I paid a payment plan off for 3 years to pay back the super. When it's paid outside of the financial year that it's required to be in, it's not tax deductible anymore. So I actually had to pay it on my profit, or on my wages, out of my own wages, plus penalties. And again, what made it worse was not that, they are entitled to it. That's why it's there. But what made it worse is that no one came to me and said, hey, I'd like to have a conversation about this. Also, no one talks about this stuff. I'm only talking about it now because it's been 10 years since this happened. So I know that I can talk about it, and it's legal and safe and all that kind of stuff. It's not like I did it on purpose. I did not set out to defraud anyone. I didn't set out to take from my staff what they deserve to have. Like, I'm not malicious. And yet I felt like I was. I felt like I was selfish. I felt like I, was foolish. There was a lot of shame attached to that. So I guess that's the journey of those few, of that kind of season of my life. It's also what was the catalyst to make me look for how I could help others in a similar situation. Because off the back of that, I then hired 7 team members within about a 4 or 6 week space. I think it was almost unheard of now. We'd love that. If people could just come and work for a bunch of therapists, we know I've got vacancies right now. That'd be amazing. But hired 7 people. I had them all fully booked within 12 weeks. And we did have an 85% rebooking rate across the team, which is, that's the stuff we coach on. Yeah. Like, that's the marketing and the rebooking and the all that kind of stuff. And it was the other side of something that fundamentally changed me as a leader. It changed me as a person. I don't think I was particularly kind to be around for you and the kids at the time. But I also know that from the ashes of that, it created my ability to be able to see through the mess, and it created my ability to know that there would be 5 years from now, and that there would be 10 years from now, and that there would be 15 years from now, and that there are things I can look back on and feel proud of. I did do my best to bring my team along with me. I individually spoke with every person so that they felt heard and got. There are lots of things that I did that I'm really proud of. I maybe would have done it in an entirely different way, knowing what I know now. But I think at the end of the day, that is the reason why I'm a coach. And so if I had to go through that season in order to be able to serve the hundreds and hundreds of people that we've had the absolute privilege of working with on their tough days, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from you too, as you're telling that story, there's a lot of emotion there. There's you going back into that moment. There's some deep feelings, and it is like 10 years ago or many, many years ago. And so we're also hearing the change that has already happened since then, and the strength that has come out of that, and some of the gift that has been as you've moved into different areas of your life. And so I guess in a way that might be a good way of being able to frame current challenges for people who might be going through challenges right now, being able to look at your story and say, here's someone who has had this incredibly difficult thing happen, no one's fault. There was no it's just literally a mistake, but it caused this massive financial and work burden and emotional challenge and relationship conflict. So many things came out of that mistake. And yet, years and years down the track, there is good that has been birthed at that moment that has come forward from that.
It's true. And I think that is something to keep in mind when you feel like if you get to a point in your business life that you feel like you can't cope anymore. The universe won't give us more than we can handle, even though it doesn't feel like that sometimes. I think that there is always the opportunity to rise like the phoenix or to have beauty from ashes, that you don't have to live there, even if you're passing through. It doesn't have to define who you are. I've gone on to have other employees, some of which I rocked at and some of which I did not. And that's okay too. That's part of learning and growth. And as humans, we grow and we change and we learn and we adapt. We do stuff differently and we create better intentions and better outcomes and set better, expectations and standards and create right systems to back those up. And I think that is all the things that I have been able to learn on the back of that season.
And even internally, one of the things that I notice is that going through something that is so challenging teaches you internally that you can overcome challenges. So sometimes things come up now and it's like, it's not that we don't have challenges. That is a huge challenge. We made another mistake. This is something that's gone wrong, whatever. And it's not as bad as that time. You remember that time before? That was
right.
bad. And you kind of have those stories or experiences for yourself. It actually does drive you forward in an easier way.
Because there was at that time, we'd started building this house that we're in now. So we were renting and building. Our son went to prep and our daughter went to kinder. Very expensive years, not very, but more expensive than we'd had up until that point. And your business wasn't going great either. There was stuff that you'd made big changes in it. And it was like we went from, a decent 6-figure personal income to like a quarter, or not quite a quarter, but, like just above a quarter of that. And it was like, I don't know how we got through, honestly, with one business hemorrhaging money and one business, doing better, but not
able to support another business hemorrhaging money.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Plus wanting to be there for our kids and all that kind of stuff. So lots of lessons to be learnt in all of it. And I think one thing that another thing that I'm incredibly grateful for is that even in that, you and I don't know if we consciously made this decision, but we actually became closer. And I think that it could have been such an easy time for either of us to pick up resentment and run with that, because you were not thrilled. I mean, we've talked about how you like certainty and structure, and that was not going to plan. You could have easily thrown all sorts of things my way and didn't. And because of the place I was in, I could have easily thrown all sorts of things at in your direction as well and didn't. And I think just being able to use that season to grow together has probably been the catalyst that's also allowed us to work well together in this business for the last 5 years together.
Yeah, truth. This is like turning into a relationship advice podcast now.
Well, I think we've been married 20, how many years this year, Jay?
22 this
year. Well
year.
Done. Good for you.
Go.
So we've married 22 years this year. And most of our adult life, we've been in business as well. So I think we do have some skills. It doesn't mean we don't fight or we don't get annoyed at each other, but I think we're really good at dealing with, because I've had to, dealing with challenges. And sometimes on the surface too, I think people, and even I forget this too sometimes. I see us now and I'm like, everything's # living our best life, and we are. And you know what? It comes off the back of, 20 years of really hard work to get where we've gotten today. And it hasn't been an easy road. It hasn't, it's had many, many challenges along the way.
Yeah, and it's true that different parts of your life do fall together. Like, I'm making a bit of a joke about relationship learnings, but the truth is also that when we learn something in our life, we learn it for us and we take that knowledge and experience to all parts of our life. So overcoming a challenge in a difficult work situation actually does bring across, maybe some emotions of all kinds of different ways into a relationship, with our kids, our friends, even into other parts of our lives as well. So it's worth kind of looking at that too when we see people right now that are going through struggles or going through difficult times. often part of what we're able to help them with then reflects into other parts of their life as well. And holistically, that can be really, really encouraging and really great. Life and the experience we have internally can be a whole lot better when we learn how to deal with challenging circumstances a bit more easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Elicia. I'm sure we'll hear your voice again next time, maybe on the other side of the microphone. But I'd love to also be able to do this again, maybe another episode in the future, have a chat with you, hear some more stories, go a bit deeper, and really get that encouragement coming out.
Thanks, James. It's been really great. I like sitting on this side of the microphone. It's fun.
No worries. Thanks for being here.